Hello everybody. What do we know about modern Iran? The first thing that comes to our mind is radical leaders. Just take a look at Khomeini's picture that would explain so much. We also know that they are fanatical followers of Islam. It was the second half of the 20th century and they have an Islamic revolution as a result of which Iran becomes the first Islamic republic. Moreover, the news tells us that Iran is a regime built on blood, terror, and aggression. Such cliches are quite common among people. Some are created by the mass media, of course, others are the result of the policy of the Islamic Republic itself. And to reveal whether it's true or false is quite difficult, but we will try to understand why Iran has become such a closed, militarized, and radically minded country. A long time ago, it was a great empire, to be more precise, 2,500 years ago, and this empire was called the Achaemenid Empire, whose borders stretched from modern Greece to India, where for a moment half of the entire population of the earth lived. And that empire had a great history and great battles and great kings. But by the end of the 17th century, it was only formally the heir of that empire when the Iranian world no longer wrote its history, but allowed others to write it. After the fall of the Safavid dynasty, the invasion of Afghans, civil wars, the country actually plunged into anarchy. After a long and bloody struggle for the throne, Aga Muhammad, the founder of the Qajar dynasty, became Shah. I would even add a cruel tyrant. After the capturing of Kerman in 1794, his army poked eyes out of 20,000 locals, but as they say, all is fair in war. The beginning of the rule of the new dynasty began with military campaigns against Georgia, where the Persians committed a real massacre. Catherine II was not particularly delighted with such news, considering that from the end of the 18th century, Georgia was under the protectorate of the Russian Empire, and not long enough already under Alexander I in 1801, Georgia joined an empire. And what's important? Of its own free will. Of course, relations between the two empires couldn't but escalate, and eventually all this resulted in the Russian-Persian War, which began in 1804. It is also worth noting that at the same time the British had no hesitation and decided to take over Persia, making it a buffer zone for protecting their eastern colony, which they were not very eager to give to anyone, and in this case to Napoleon, who has his sights on India. As a result, the British went ahead, who would doubt, and concluded several beneficial agreements with Persia aimed at protecting British interests in India, as well as guaranteeing the support of Persia with both weapons and troops. God helps those who help themselves. Persians didn't follow that proverb and eventually screwed up without waiting for military support from the British. Fath Ali Shah, it was the second Shah of the Qajar dynasty, didn't lose his head and went to rapprochement with France. As it was an anti-English alliance, it was a really beneficial deal for France. Immediately after which the military mission of General Jourdan arrived there, which began the reorganization of the Persian army. But even with French support, Russia got Persia struck dumb. By 1806, Russian troops occupied almost the entire Transcaucasia, and then, as luck would have it, France concluded a Tilsit peace treaty with Russia. And this, of course, was too much for Ali Shah. So, choosing between two evils, he decided to go back to rapprochement with England. British were quite happy with the state of affairs, and as you can see, Iran maneuvered between the great powers in the early 19th century. Moreover, gradually, the British influence became so great that the Iranian government code governs all state affairs under foreign guidance. Sometime later, with the support of the British Empire, Persia resumed hostilities in the summer of 1810 with Russia. But the outcome was the same as with the French, defeat. Later, the Shah has got into peace negotiations. Persia was totally trapped due to defeat, so they had to make significant concessions to St. Petersburg. Ultimately, in 1813, the Gulistan Peace Treaty was concluded, according to which Persia recognized a number of Transcaucasian territories as a part of the Russian Empire and also recognized Russia as having the exclusive right to keep a navy in the Caspian Sea. Gradually, Russian influence in Persia began to grow, and in subsequent years, the Shah's court took an outwardly friendly position towards Russia, but they, of course, didn't abandon the idea of returning their lost territories on a good day. At the same time, the English influence, as it was predominant, remained the same, as Yermolov, the Russian ambassador to the Shah's court, wrote, "Without the English, almost nothing is done." By 1826, Persia regained strength, and who would have thought, with the support of the British, began to openly go to war with Russia. But even 13 years later, the result was the same. The Persian army suffered several serious defeats, and ultimately, Feth Ali Shah had no other options but to conclude a peace treaty that enabled Russia to gain to the hill. Actually, under this treaty, new territories were joined to Russia. In addition, Persia was obliged to pay a huge indemnity in the amount of 10 crores, 20 million rubles in silver. In general, Persia in the first half of the 19th century is a typical feudal country with the predominance of semi-independent outlying feudal lords and nomadic semi-nomadic tribes, playing a significant role in the state administration of the country. The result of the reign of Feth Ali Shah, who was on the throne from 1797 to 1834, can be described as quote, "Difficult economic problems and military and technological abilities took Iran to the verge of governmental disintegration, which was quickened by a consequent struggle for the throne after Ali Shah's death." And another assessment, quote, "Persia is in the most exhausted and declined state, weak government of the Shah dejected by years, disagreement between his sons, famine in the southern provinces, and general oppression complete the ruin of Persia." After the death of Shah in 1834, both British and Russian empires pledged by treaty not to interfere in the internal affairs of Iran. This agreement permanently defined their policy in the region and made an old empire a buffer state. Thanks for watching. Leave likes, comment, subscribe, share this video, and see you later. Bye.